Strap in, the round-the-world adventures continue. I have a very short connection time in Madrid. With just 50 minutes between the scheduled arrival and departure, will I clear immigration and make my connection? And if I don't, what happens? And then what's Iberia's domestic business class service like? Let's find out. Welcome to the channel. With over 20 years of business class flying and more than 1 million miles in the air, I've seen it all at 35,000 feet. Now I'm taking things to the next level, an unforgettable round-the-world journey in business class, from London through Asia, across the Pacific and into the Americas. Join me each fortnight as I dive into every detail, the luxury, the letdowns and honest reviews of each flight experience. Love travel, aviation or just chasing the thrill of the skies? Hit that subscribe button and join me for the adventure of a lifetime. My flight from Rio de Janeiro arrived at Terminal 4S of Madrid Airport. Because I sat towards the back of the business class cabin, I was one of the first passengers off the aircraft. I had just 50 minutes to clear immigration, change terminals and re-clear security to make my connecting flight. That felt pretty tight, so could I make it? First stop was immigration. On previous trips to Spain, I've joined very long lines, queuing for the best part of an hour to see an immigration officer. Fortunately, this time I was able to use an e-gate before getting my passport stamped by an officer. After immigration, I had to change terminals. Luckily, there was a transit rather than transfer buses. With the clock ticking, I waited a few precious minutes for the transit to arrive. 8 minutes later, I arrived at Terminal 4. Up some escalators, I headed to transit security. The queues at security were thankfully very short, with new scanners in operation, meaning laptops and liquids could stay in bags. With just 23 minutes until the flight was due to leave, would I make the connection? The terminal was a maze of shops, more shops and restaurants before you reached the gates. Fortunately, mine was one of the closest gates. At a fast pace, it took 5 minutes to walk there. Despite the imminent departure of the flight, boarding hadn't started, so I was able to relax and join the queue. Iberia operates up to 14 daily flights between Madrid and Barcelona, helping make it one of the busiest airline routes in Europe. I'm sure if I'd missed the flight, I would have been bumped onto the next one. The flight was on an Airbus A321 aircraft, registration Echo Charlie Juliet Romeo Echo. It was 19 years old. It was about another 5 minutes before boarding started. I made the transit journey with 8 minutes to spare. Like the transatlantic flight from Rio, Iberia invited Oneworld Emerald passengers to board in Group 0, ahead of most business class passengers. There were a few more Emerald passengers on this flight, so I wasn't quite the first down the air bridge. Business class was at the front of the aircraft. There were 5 rows with 2 seats used either side of the aisle. The middle seat on each side wasn't used. I was in the middle of the cabin in window seat 3 Alpha. The seat had a width of 17.7 inches. The pitch between rows was 30 inches. In the back of the seat in front was a small storage compartment, a tray table and a small storage pocket. The tray table was a pretty standard type, but was clean. Overhead there was limited luggage space. There were reading lights and individual air vents. Below the seat was a power socket and a USB-A port. There was some delay after boarding, with lots of discussions taking place between the crew and others behind a closed curtain. The air bridge was retracted 15 minutes behind the original departure time. A manual safety briefing was delivered. We pushed back from the gate at 10:45 a.m. We taxied across the airfield past Terminal 4S to take off from runway 36 right. We arrived at the runway 16 minutes later at 11:01 a.m. As we take off, it's time to thank my supporters in the doors to automatic cabin crew. Just £4 per month gives you early access to reviews and other behind-the-scenes content, including the next episode of this series, which is already available. Head over to Patreon to join the cabin crew. The scheduled flight time from Madrid to Barcelona was 80 minutes, but today we could expect a flight time of just 49 minutes, meaning despite the late departure, we could expect to arrive within 5 minutes of the scheduled arrival time. The route would take us across the Aragon region before overflying Barcelona to turn over the sea to come into land. Wi-Fi was available during the flight. It was complimentary for business class passengers, otherwise it would have cost €5.99. 10 minutes after takeoff, drinks were served. A few minutes later, a plate of cold meat and cheese was offered with some breadsticks. And then a basket of snacks and crisps was offered. I booked my round-the-world ticket with the One World Alliance. The ticket included 9 flights, departing from London, flying 28,000 miles and arriving back in London just over 3 weeks later. The business class ticket cost £7,985. Booking each flight separately could have cost as much as £14,185. So at just 28 pence per mile, I thought this was very reasonable for a premium ticket. We flew over the coast just to the north of Barcelona. We came into land on runway 25 right and taxied to Terminal 1. The taxi took just 4 minutes. This was an interesting flight. It was the shortest flight of my trip and was clearly operating as a commuter service between Spain's largest 2 cities. I was worried about the short connection time. I'd been tracking the flights for the previous few days, and the flight from Rio had been arriving late. Fortunately for me, my flight from Rio arrived slightly ahead of schedule. And it looks like the commuter flight to Barcelona was being held to fit as many people on board as possible. Had this been a standalone flight, I don't think that business class would have been worth it for just 49 minutes in the air. However, as an international transit passenger, the empty seat next to me and the snacks and drinks were well received. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Next time my round-the-world adventures conclude as I fly back to London, I'll reflect on my overall experience and some of the things I've learnt along the way. Subscribe now so you don't miss out.